We are the Childhood Collective, and we have helped thousands of overwhelmed parents find joy and confidence in raising their child with ADHD. I'm Katie, a speech language pathologist.
And I'm Lori.
And I'm Mallory, and we're both child psychologists. We combine the science of ADHD with the compassion of moms and bring you practical tools you can start using today.
So hit subscribe and let's help your family shine with ADHD.
We are thrilled to have Amy Marie Hann as our first guest on the Shining with ADHD podcast. Amy is the creator of Master the Mundane, a unique online course and community that empowers moms with ADHD to manage their home and family in a way that works for their brain. ADHD has touched every area of Amy's life. She herself was diagnosed at the age of 5, and her 3 kids, husband, dad, and sister are also ADHD. She's also fostered, adopted, and homeschooled kids with ADHD, and she brings a wealth of personal experience, authenticity, and relatability to everything she creates. She believes that the ADHD brain is uniquely created to bring good to the world, and the best thing we can do as moms of ADHD kids is to model what it looks like to thrive with ADHD. She's a loud laugher, an avid reader, and a workout enthusiast with a mild obsession with HGTV. You can find her online on Instagram at Activated ADHD Mama or at www.amymariehann.com. Amy, welcome. We are so excited to have you on our podcast today. Obviously, I just introduced you, but tell our audience a little bit about yourself. Specifically, what led you to this place of creating an online course and a community for moms with ADHD?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And truly, this is such an honor. I think you guys are so great. I love everything that you create. And I'm so excited for you about this podcast. So it is an honor to be the first guest.
Yes.
And, like everything, it is such a journey. So like you mentioned, I was diagnosed at a young age, at the age of 5. But so much changed for me in motherhood. I have always been, I was the kind of kid who always babysat. I love babies.
Mm-hmm.
In college, I worked at the girls' club and in a youth group, and I always liked kids. And so I just thought, like, being a stay-at-home mom, when my son, oldest, was 18 months, I transitioned to be a stay-at-home mom. And, that was a transition for figuring out what it looked like to use my brain. Was definitely a transition. But then when I had my third kid,
Mm-hmm.
the additional load of, all the administrative and all the executive functioning required of having 3 kids, plus the hormonal shift of being in my late 30s, it was like, holy cow,
Yeah.
Life got so much harder. And I am an organized systems type person. And I love online business and was already kind of thinking about doing a course and just trying to work through all the things and figuring out how I could create something that really helped and added value, help people. I love to help. If you're an Enneagram person, I'm a very strong Enneagram too.
Oh,
and so
I love it.
I really wanted to put something in the world that really helped other people. And so this course really came out of my own work of trying to figure out how in the world do I do this and manage my home in a way that makes sense for my brain. And it wasn't really until I stepped back and kind of blew up the preconceived notions of how I was supposed to do it,
Mm-hmm.
and allowed myself to figure out new strategies that were really based on my ADHD research. Because, I know you 3 are very highly distinguished and educated, but I also know that so many moms with ADHD go deep. And probably everyone they get a diagnosis goes deep into the, obsessive educating themselves. And so I really wanted to take all of those things that I was learning, because there was no one talking about it. There were tools for talking about raising ADHD kids, but no one was talking about what it is like, both because you're raising ADHD kids, plus you're managing your own ADHD, and then, managing home and family and all the executive functioning that comes with that. So that's kind of the course is a byproduct of that, and then conversations with women trying to determine, really how I could create something that was of value to them. And so it has been really fun to bring it into the world and see it really helping others.
Oh, I love
I
that
love
so
that.
much. And
Yeah.
I think that's such an interesting point that you make because, like you said, you were diagnosed as a child. And there's a lot of women out there who were not diagnosed as a child, but they've struggled, right? And things are hard. And then I think that's one of the huge things that they say is like, what really drives women to get a diagnosis is a big life shift, adding a new kid, taking on a new job, hitting menopause. Like these are kind of stages in life where all of a sudden what was manageable no longer is. And so that's really an incredible example of really like that third child. And I only have 2 kids and I feel like my brain is exploding most of the days. So I'm like, oh my gosh, adding a third, I truly think that would have overwhelmed me to the point. So I think it's really cool that you share that because for people who are diagnosed or even if they aren't, sometimes that life change can really be a big kind of
Yeah.
catalyst for looking into it.
And not to get too much off track, but I talked to so many families that just never got a diagnosis. I'm just curious, like, what led your family? Like, what were they seeing at that time that led them to get an evaluation? Because so many people I talk to that are like my age and parents that are my age were really struggling, and their parents just didn't even know what ADHD was.
I truly think it was like a miracle because my older sister, actually, she was diagnosed first. So she must have been in first or second grade, which is why mine was so early. If she hadn't been
Gotcha.
diagnosed, I probably would have
Okay.
just skated by and not gotten the diagnosis because she struggled more academically. I liked school. She was more of a social butterfly. Like she liked people and friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I was more the type that I was very motivated by the gold stars and grades
Yep.
and stuff. And so, but I was always medicated, but I was definitely, it's because it's hard to know because I didn't have that period
Mm-hmm.
where I wasn't.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so, but I did have days, when I'd forget my medicine and I'd be all over the place. And, and kids would be like, did you forget your medicine? So, but I didn't know anyone like me, especially girls.
Mm-hmm.
The only other kids that I knew that were diagnosed growing up or on medicine were like the naughty boys,
Yep.
the boys that were
Yep.
like would hit people or get in trouble or didn't get good grades, and I was like the straight A student who
Yep.
took medicine. So so it was kind of, and it was really, I don't know if I mentioned this, it was a teacher of my sister's who was like, this child is not trying to misbehave, and encouraged my parents to take us to a private psychologist to get diagnosed. But
Yeah, I
we
know
didn't
my
know anything,
brother
of course,
growing.
back then.
Yeah, I remember my brother struggled all through school, and it was really a teacher in high school that said to my mom, like, "Hey, this seems like," and it was like all the pieces came together, like it all of a sudden made sense. Like she had never even heard of that. So, um, teachers can be really awesome and really, really helpful in making those referrals. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Absolutely. And
another, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, in the yes, the teacher intervened, and I just think now looking back, because especially being an inattentive, I mean, I'm actually combined because I definitely have the hyperactive as well. But I think my struggles, even looking back, were more, I could see the social implications, ways it played out, like just with boyfriends and anxiety and things like that, that still would have gone under the radar still, because now we know so much more about the emotional aspect of ADHD, whereas back then that was still kind of, not understood.
Absolutely. Thank you
Yep.
so much for
And it,
sharing about your story because I think that's so important for parents to hear. Not all journeys look the same. And so we really appreciate you kind of sharing that. And I think there's a lot of people that will relate to aspects of that.
for sure. And we love the work that you're doing with moms with ADHD or suspected ADHD. And I think one of the most common questions that we get in our DMs and our emails is from moms that are raising kids with ADHD and they're burnt out. Having ADHD yourself, raising ADHD is a lot of work. And so we know that you're in this unique position, you have all this experience to really help moms that are feeling this burnout, right? And so one of the things that you talk about are your 4 mistakes that moms with ADHD might be making, and how those things can maybe be making burnout worse. So we'd love for you to tell us more about those 4 mistakes.
Absolutely. Okay. So the the four mistakes. This is huge because so much of it is in our heads of this burnout and our expectations of ourselves. But the first thing that we do is really punishing ourselves for having ADHD. And the main way that looks is by neglecting the things that are good for us because we're kind of stuck in this shame cycle. And, and I know you guys, your first episode, I think, was really explaining executive functioning. But when you take a look at what executive functioning is, I mean, it impacts everything. And so many of the things that we are expected to do as parents, as moms, is impacted by this. I mean, task initiation, organization, planning, working memory, all the things that, you have to remember just to get everybody buckled in the car in the morning. I mean, there's just so many things that and it is such a significant mental load. And I think, you have to step back, and we have that list of shoulds of we think that we should be able to do these things because other people can do them, or our mom could do it, or our mother-in-law could do it. But if you when you step back and realize, I think that's why just a diagnosis is so affirming for people. But even then, you have to remember, like, really knowing what executive functioning is. And I think for me, just even being able to say, like, I'm having a low executive functioning day, because sometimes things are just not, even with doing all the things, you have low executive functioning day. And so what the consequence of that is the punishing yourselves is there are so many things that we can do. And I believe in medicine. I believe in exercising. There's so many things that we can do to just take care of ourselves. But beyond that, I believe a lot of us need stimulation. We need to do things that are interesting to us. And so many of the things that we do as moms is so boring.
Absolutely.
And so many moms get stuck in this cycle of like, well, until I get a handle on the laundry, I can't, work on that painting that I've been wanting to do, or I can't, whatever the interesting thing is. And maybe it's, I can't start that podcast I've been wanting to do. And so we get stuck in this cycle. We get stuck in the cycle of shame because we don't make time for the thing that's going to really energize and stimulate us to do the boring thing. So it's so much like with a kid that you think about the teacher who, they take recess away from the kid because they're being bad, when in reality, that's the thing. They need that release because it's going to make it a lot easier for them to sit still and to listen. So I think moms, we are just so hard on ourselves.
Oh my gosh, you're speaking our language, because I'm sure we're like really, really opposed to people taking away recess. But I think that's so interesting, because I think the idea of like that delaying your joy or the things that stimulate you is really very true. I know I experienced that in my own life. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get through these 20 things before I can go work out. When in reality, if I worked out first, I would feel better. I would have more energy. I would be in such a better place. But that it almost, for me, translates into anxiety, like feeling a lot of fear and a lot of stress. And that's really interesting. I hadn't really thought of it in that way, but that's a really interesting way to explain it.
It's a big shift, and it can be a very scary shift, especially for moms. I think I love the ADHD mom population because, especially those raising ADHD kids, because they have these burning hearts to want to help their kids, and they want to do everything for them. And it is a hard mental, especially when you have kids that, it's like one thing to say, you have to put your life vest on first or whatever. I know that that's such an overused analogy, but really understanding what that means. And for a lot of us, just giving ourselves permission without the guilt to do things that are interesting and stimulate us, and in ways that work for us is so crucial. It's really what our brain needs. It's that stimulation that we need because we are drawn to, new things. We're drawn to, we're curious. We're, just like the same thing with our kids. It's like when you can turn something into and relate it to something they are naturally interested in, they're going to be more successful. They're going to be more naturally interested. And so we have to do that for ourselves too. So that's the first. The second is our unrealistic expectations of ourselves, which of course, this is directly tied to executive functioning, because executive functioning, we have that time blindness. We have, the planning, And so it is not a character flaw. It is part of our executive functioning challenges that make it hard for us to set realistic expectations and to plan, and I think so. I think it's overwhelming to do that on a daily basis. I think, and that's really kind of what we do in Mastermind is, kind of step back and have kind of a realistic plan for our, to our days, to our weeks, to our months that isn't so overwhelming, because when we have all these things, these tasks that we think that we can get, and my brain still goes there all the time, and I'm like, okay, it's Saturday, so I should be able to paint the bedroom. I should, like plan meals for the month, like go to Costco, like host a barbecue, like all these things I want to do. And our brains, I think it's one of the amazing things about our brains. We see the possibility. We see all these. And for me, the biggest example of this is my home projects. Because I'm like, I look around my house and I'm like, okay, I want to paint those. I want to paint that. And so I think I should be able to get all that done this month. But in reality, that's like a year or two's worth of like little small weekend projects. And so being able to kind of step back and have a big picture. But so what happens with these unrealistic expectations, when you also combine it with the ADHD, inconsistent, our energy ebbs and flows, which is just something that we have to accept and plan for, and then especially if you're like me approaching perimenopause, it becomes even more significant, around our cycle, these energy, dips. But what happens is we have these unrealistic expectations of ourselves, and then we base our worth on our low energy days. So there's those days where we're like have no motivation, and we're just like, okay, I'm just gonna like binge Netflix or whatever. And when we think about what kind of mom we are, we think about that day, but we don't think about the day when we were like at the playground and had the people over, where we did so many things and we were present and we were joyful and we were like doing the things that make us feel good and make us feel alive. And so we're constantly beating ourselves up because we're basing our worth and value on those low energy days instead of really planning for them, like understanding that they're going to happen. And I also, part of this is learning that even on those high energy days to know how much is enough. So that because we forget because of our working memory, we've done the laundry, we've cooked, prepped dinner, we've folded the laundry, we've prepped for dinner, we've cleaned the house, tidied everything, we've done so many things, and then we're like, okay, we got to keep going, we got to keep doing more things, and then we're gonna paint the bedroom, and then we're gonna iron the clothes, and so then we get to burnout because instead of saying like, okay, hey, I prepped dinner, I did the laundry, I vacuumed, like I'm gonna sit and watch a show, or I'm gonna call a girlfriend, or I'm gonna go on a walk outside, or I'm gonna just do something that fills me up. And so then the next day we don't have those big dips as much when you're pausing and you have a kind of clear vision of like what's enough and giving yourself those breaks and those stimulating, energizing activities on a regular basis. And that then instead the next day you have more energy, as opposed to if you had tried to push through and do all the things, the next day you're going to be totally zonked out. And so the lows just hit harder because you have pushed it too much. So
and sometimes you feel like you need to like, how do I take that time for myself? And there are many single moms out there, or single dads, or parents that just don't have a lot of resources. Like, how do you recommend they like manage that? Like, how do they ask for help, or who do they ask for help from, or how have you done that in the past?
Well, I think that is a huge part of it, realizing your own demands and needs. And then because part of it is creating that life where you have those people that you can ask for help for. And so I think a lot of people, it's just a barrier of even asking for help or finding those people. And so, this doesn't just happen overnight. It's a process of realizing that you need to create a life where you have some support. And I know that's easier said than done, but I believe that intimate relationships start with showing our needs. And sometimes it starts with asking for help,
Mm-hmm.
and finding that mom because I think we wait to find relationships where we feel safe to ask for help, when in reality, those kind of relationships are formed by asking for help. And so, yeah, it's not easy. But I think a lot of us have that internal shame that even if we do have the people, we don't want to ask for it, or we feel bad about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think a lot of it too is there's a transition in what was available to you before you had kids and what is available to you now. So some of it's going through that, okay, well, yeah, maybe I can't go on a hike for an hour, but like maybe just going and taking my child to the playground and giving myself permission to like read this book while they're playing, and there's, and the gates are locked and they're safe. And I can just sit here and like listen to my audiobook or read my book or just have a minute to myself. Because some people, the thing is they want to be with people because they're extroverts, and some people they need to be alone. So I think there's some internal reflection of like what can that look like for you, and then finding ways to work that into your life.
I love that. And I think a really simple reframe for parents who are kind of listening and thinking like, how am I going to ask someone for help, is to kind of put yourself in their shoes. I know most of us listening, when someone asked us for help, we would be like, yes, 100%. Like, you're burnt out. What can I do? I will bring you dinner. I will take your child with me to go to the park. And I think when you put it in that, kind of flip it and be like, would I be willing to help someone if they were struggling? And the answer is, I think most of the time, absolutely. And so giving people the benefit of the doubt too, and it can be really scary, but I totally agree with you that, sometimes that's how those relationships really start, is like by just showing up and being like, hey, this is my need. And that's huge, but it can be really challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And even taking turns. I think if you're a single mom, like finding another single parent that you're like, hey, you watch them, every Tuesday night, one of us. No matter what, all of this involves letting go of your preconceived expectations of yourself, the kind of mom you think you're going to be, because you might not think that that's okay, or what it's supposed to look like. And I think for a lot of us, that's the biggest mental barrier, is like pushing through that, your expectations.
Yeah.
So the third mistake is thinking, this is completely related to you guys, thinking that you are a neurotypical mom raising neurotypical kids. And you guys know that our kids they need a lot. It's especially if you have multiple kids with different sensory issues. They have just getting my kids enough exercise, the sleep issues, potty training. Like, we have had bedwetting for a long time.
Yes.
There's just finding foods that everybody like. There's just a mental load that you're carrying that other people aren't. And not that, their life isn't easy, or it's a comparison thing that you need to like say our life's so much harder, but I don't think that's helpful. But I do think there are things that you're thinking about and worrying about that other moms aren't. And you have to like give yourself some grace.
Absolutely.
And stop comparing yourself to them or to their family, because it's just not helpful.
Yep.
Yeah, I talked to so many families where they're like, I just had to like get off social media because I'm following all these like accounts that are like geared towards like, typically developing kids, and none of this stuff is working, or I feel like I'm failing because it's working for them and it's not working for me. And it just is really frustrating.
And I think
I feel like it comes up a lot. Sorry, I was just saying, like, it sneaks up, and it still sneaks up on me, that there are things that I'm like my best friend, they're taking their family for the second time to this really fun looking like family camp out in Colorado. And it was just, thinking, I just think it looks so fun and it's so fun for them, but I'm like, I just am still not sure it would be good fit for my kids. And and then seeing them do it, and it's so fun, but just those things, it comes back and you're like, man, it would be great if it was, but it's not,
Yeah, it feels like a lot of what you're saying is like shifting your expectations for yourself, for your kids. I always say expectations are the root of all heartache. I remember seeing that on a poster once, and I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, that is so true in so many ways.
Absolutely. And also our kids, like just even in terms of our time, like I think planning for that, because like expecting it, just even thinking through, I'm a very visual person, but even like our schedules, like knowing that we need to go to the playground and knowing, like just even thinking about our rhythms of our life, and knowing that, you know, if our lives are too busy or too hectic, it's not going to be good. Our kids are, knowing those triggers and designing that life that is the right pace for you and for your family, because you just their needs have to be factored in, because if not, it doesn't work. Even if it looks good on paper, you have to factor in their needs. So
I think
how you're
another
living your
aspect of
life.
this too is I think of all the therapies that a lot of kids are doing. And if you have like one child who's in OT for handwriting and then another child who needs OT more for sensory and getting dressed or feeding therapy, like sometimes you're actually running to different clinics. As a speech pathologist, I used to, feel like before I had kids, I would feel really bummed when a family would leave my schedule because they're like, we just can't do it all right now. We have so much going on. And as a mom myself, and my kids are in various activities and therapy, there's just a cost to all of that in terms of your time, your driving. It's really challenging when you're working full time, but also the financial piece. Like now I'm arguing with insurance and I'm okay, well, I don't want to deal with insurance. I'm going to pay privately, but there's a cost to that too. So, when you're comparing and you're looking at someone else's social media or even just people you don't know that well who aren't sharing their daily struggles on Instagram, it's like it can feel like, oh my gosh, everyone else gets to go on this vacation or do this thing, but I can't right now because my child needs this support, in terms of therapy or whatever it is. And that can be, I think there's a grief process that you go through, and that's okay.
Absolutely, there's such a group, and then the financial stress too. And I think a lot of moms, I did something in my stories the other day. Someone was asking about, between work but I think there are a lot of moms with kids with special needs who would like to be working or like to have that challenge, but because the demands of their family, they don't feel like they have that option, and that puts a whole other financial stress.
Yes.
So, you're paying for all these things. It's just a lot.
Yep.
So, anyways,
Lovely.
my heart goes out because I'm in it too. I get it. Okay, the last mistake is self-trust, that we don't trust ourselves. And so, because the thing I hear from women so much is like, I just can't make myself stick to anything. And I think, yes, 100%, it's the systems have that so many of the things that people suggest are for neurotypical people and not for neurodivergent people. But I think what happens with the stick-to-itness is, even if you don't trust yourself, you'll never stick to it, even if it is the right system for you. Because an example I give is, if you follow me, I talk a lot. How we do meals is I do a monthly meal prep, super easy meals, freezer meals, and I do like one big shop. And so the example is like someone tries that, and it like they spent 2 weeks like researching recipes, and they're so excited, and it's a ton of work, but they do it, and then for the next month, like dinners are so much easier, and they're happy and they're confident. But then life happens, and they go on a trip, and that next month is just a little bit chaotic. They never have a chance to do that meal prep, even though it was so helpful and it really worked and they really liked it. Just life happens. And so instead of getting back to it the next month, they blame themselves and are like, I'm the problem. I should have never done that. Of course I can't keep up with anything. Instead of just realizing it's just life, and it was just busy and they could just get back to it. So that's something that I try to work a lot with women on, is being able to kind of change their mindset to believe in themselves. And I think a lot of that is that, shame from ADHD, that a lot of us, because that grew up, and even me having been diagnosed, there are still a lot of things that I masked for a long time. And I still had to work through the shame issues around ADHD, but being able to just be more authentically ourselves and to learn to trust ourselves in small ways. And I know that's something that you guys really work on, teaching people to really develop that in their children as well. is huge. So we have to learn to trust ourselves and believe in ourselves in order to really implement and stick to anything for the long haul.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing all of those mistakes. And I think so many people will like resonate with all of those. But we know you have an online course, Master the Mundane, and a free webinar for moms with ADHD. And again, for all the listeners, we linked that in the show notes, so make sure you check that out. But what sort of outcomes have you seen from moms who have taken your course? We would love to hear about it.
Yes, it is. It's so fun. So I have the course has been in existence for almost a year, so it's been really cool to see the stories of the progress. And the biggest thing, without a doubt, is the mindset shift, and then being able to really build confidence in their daily schedule. So I do some pretty tactical things like time blocking and developing a daily rhythm, but I do it in a very unique way where people think that they could never have ever stuck to anything. So really, I think the biggest thing is seeing the confidence boost that brings. The second thing that I hear a lot is in marriages is how much better they are able to explain their challenges to their spouse, and then their husbands also kind of just developing that confidence and seeing them, seeing the changes. And I am a firm believer that it is two people that manage a home, but I believe when you're raising neurodivergent kids, especially, I mean, in my family, everyone in our house is neurodivergent. So there's a lot of things to be carried. And so a lot of the home stuff falls on me. My husband carries a really significant load as well in caring for our kids. But just being able to have more confidence in the job that you are doing and caring for your home, which I think spills out in other areas. The third piece is really finally taking time for themselves and really even because a lot of those questions, like you were saying, when you're so overwhelmed or burnt out, it is really hard to even think about what you'd like to do for fun.
And then you actually
you're
have
just in
like
survival mode.
Exactly. You get like an hour or two to yourself, and then you're like, I don't even know what to do. I can't even prioritize it because there's so many options. And then the 2 hours just fly by and I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I even do? So you're right.
Watch Netflix or something, which didn't really satisfy you.
Right. Yeah.
To do the thing. So I think it's getting to that place, like getting out of survival mode.
Yeah.
Because you have more confidence, have more confidence managing their home. They're starting to really like have more confidence in their marriage where they don't feel it. Because the thing that I find is so many women are like, I'm the worst mom. It's this failure loop that because they have so much expectations of themselves that are unrealistic. And a lot of it is they put it on themselves. So getting out of that headspace, getting to a place where they feel confident that they're doing the best they can for their family and their home so that they can actually get to a place where they can even think about doing something for themselves. One of the women, I love this story. She is one of those people that's so hard on herself. She has 6 kids, homeschooling. Wow. They just moved, like so many things. Yes. I'm like, that was a lot. And so she just started going to a volleyball class. Joined a volleyball league, which I just thought was really cool that she's like, I felt bad asking, my husband to watch the kids, but she needed to exercise. And so I'm like, that is amazing. Like for so many people, that's like such a victory to like do something for themselves without guilt and realize that it is so good, like realize how much it helps their family. Because when they're healthy and they're doing these things, not just are they happy, but they're also modeling that for their kids. Because I believe so many of us are motivated by wanting to help our kids, but I believe by doing, like my kids seeing me get up and go to the gym every morning, my kids seeing me stretch, my kids seeing me say, I'm sorry that I yelled. That was not, all of these things that these disciplines to manage our ADHD, we're modeling it for them. And that's how they really implement into their own lives.
I feel like so much of what you're saying, I see so many parallels with the advice that we're giving parents and helping them raise their kids with ADHD. So just setting those reasonable expectations, being gentle, expecting variations from day to day in terms of how productive or on it their child is. building in time for their child doing things that they really love to do, what fills their cup, grow their confidence. Everything you're saying, I'm like, yep, that's what we're telling parents to do with their kids too. So there's just so many parallels between how to treat yourself and how to raise your kids when it comes to having ADHD and growing, raising kids with ADHD. So I love all that you're sharing. I think it's great. And another question we get a lot from parents is, how do I help my child be a successful adult? Like sometimes they're just stuck in the nitty gritty of like, how are we going to make it through the morning? But then they have these moments of reflection and they're thinking, how is this all part of the bigger picture? How do I help my child grow to be a successful, independent adult? Is my child going to be able to go to college? How do I help know that they're going to be find a successful career? So what advice would you give parents who are listening, who are maybe wondering, how do they support their child and help them find fulfillment and success once they become adults?
Well, it's interesting because I was raised ADHD, and there are so many things that I always think back that like we don't like being told what to do, and there's so many things you have to learn the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the biggest thing we can do, I think about like what I'm always trying to remind myself in parenting, is just having that close communication.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing more than anything that I wish that I'd had the perspective of is just really having eyes to see, like being able to speak into the things that they do uniquely well. Because especially with ADHD, um, we have these unique areas where we shine. I love that you guys talk about just like shining where we shine,
Mm-hmm.
and just looking for those and pulling that out all the time, like looking for those things they do uniquely well, and then like and keeping track of that, keep pointing them towards that. Those things, how you want to do this thing, like I see that working out because you're good at this and this and this. Like just always pointing them back to what those innate gifts, because if they really believe that they have those innate gifts, I think those will lead them and guide them, knowing that they can do any. I believe that we are problem solvers, that we take chances. There are so many good things that can lead us to be successful, and I think for so many of us as adults who learn ADHD, the shame is the biggest hindrance. And I think one thing that was unique about me is that because I was medicated at a young age, I still had some shame and I still had some relationship things with ADHD, but I always believed I was smart because I never went through that. I never got bad grades. And school, I think I still would have liked school, but I definitely don't think I would have reached my full potential had I not had that. And so I always believed I was smart. I always believed that I could succeed. And so I think that is a gift with having an early diagnosis, is being able to protect our kids from some of those preconceived ideas. And I caveat that with, I do not believe that success at school necessarily means that you're smart.
Right.
Because, and I have different kids that, I don't know that all my kids will be successful in school from the A's perspective, but I also believe my kids are very smart. So being able to adjust our expectations and really just speak to the things that they are uniquely good at.
I love that so
time.
much, Amy. It really is so meaningful to hear you say that, because like growing up in my house, grades were a very big emphasis. Like we would all get our report cards and like show our parents, and it was really stressful for one of my siblings who struggled so much in school, like with memory tasks and things like that. And it was very much like the other talents that were there, my parents were always like, sure, that's great, but like school is the most important thing. And I think as a parent with multiple kids, recognizing that every kid has their own strengths is huge. And it may not be academics, or it might be one area, like maybe math is easy, but reading and writing is much more challenging, or vice versa. And I think that's a really important kind of nuance there, that when we say success or having a successful and happy life, it doesn't necessarily mean going to medical school. It just means finding the things that light you up and being able to follow those.
Yep.
And I also think like there are things about myself looking back. I'm like, I did well in school, but there are some things about myself I missed, like some things that I was actually really good at
Mhm.
that set me apart. Whereas that I shined in the world that I wish someone had pointed out to me more, because I feel like now as an adult that those are the things that never went away.
Mhm.
So
So
anyways, I
interesting.
think I truly believe that we are wired to bring good. And one of the things, this is a small thing. So I, have a strong faith. And one of the things that like I pray for my kids as I'm dropping them off. I can't say I do it every day. I try to do it a lot, especially with my oldest.
Mhm.
He's my out of the box thinker. And so I just, I pray that, like Lord, help him to bring his big ideas to the world,
Mm.
to just,
I love
to
that.
share his ideas, because I think that's, we do have this out of the box way of thinking, and I
Yes.
think it leads to really good places, but they have to learn to trust that. So,
Yeah, and I think we sometimes get so focused on our kids' challenges and not think about how we can use their amazing brains, and develop those areas to help them change the world. I mean, I see so many kids that get referred because of challenges, and working with them, and you see, oh my gosh, they have these like amazing skills and ways of thinking about things and problem solving, and this immense focus on this one area that is going to change the world, and we just have to like bring that out of them.
Yep.
So I love what you're saying. It's so great. Thank you so much. This has been amazingly helpful. I know our listeners are going to be really excited to hear more about what you have to say. So, can you tell us a little bit more about where they can find you and how they can sign up for your free webinar?
yes, the best place to find me is on Instagram at Activated ADHD Mama. And there is a link there to my free webinar. It is, I believe the link is manage your homes, www.amymarie.com/manage your home sign up. But it's going to be linked here in the show notes.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
so go there, and in that I talk through these 4 mistakes in detail, and then also explain kind of my strategy for breaking through these 4 mistakes.
I love
So
it.
that is the best place to kind of take a next step in learning about kind of my strategy for helping moms master the
I
mundane.
love it. And I personally love just on your Instagram all of the practical things that you share. So this is how I prep lunches, or your meal prep, your dinner prep is truly impressive. I follow that every week or every month. I'm like, oh, there it is again. And I need more freezer space. So I think that for parents that are looking just for really realistic ways to sort of take these steps, that's a really great place to start. Amy, thank you so much for being here. I'm so,
Yes. Thank
so
you so
excited to
much.
have you. And you're our very first guest on the podcast. So it means a lot to get to talk with you and hear your perspective. Thanks for listening to Shining with ADHD by your hosts, Lori, Katie, and Mallory of the Childhood Collective.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like this video and hit subscribe so you can be the first to know when a new episode airs.
If you are looking for links and resources mentioned in this episode, you can always find those in the show notes. See you next time.